You know the scene, right? Ghosts wandering down the street, glowing pumpkins on every porch, kids with bags overflowing with candy. But have you ever stopped and wondered, really wondered, where does all this stuff actually come from? The costumes, the carving, the whole trick-or-treat deal?
Well, that's what we're going to get into, and let me tell you, the answer is, well, it's not as simple as you might think. We're going to trace this whole story from an ancient, spooky fire festival all the way to the Halloween we know and love today.
So look at this. On one hand, you've got this ancient festival, Samhain. We're talking bonfires, honoring ancestors, the end of the harvest, pretty serious stuff. And then on the other hand, you've got modern Halloween, trick-or-treating, costume parties, all the spooky fun. They look like they're from different planets, right? But believe it or not, they are deeply, deeply tangled together in a story that's been unfolding for over 2,000 years.
So here's our game plan. First, we're going to meet Halloween's ancient ghost, the Festival of Samhain. Then, we'll see what happens when Christianity crashes the party. After that, we'll watch how our modern holiday was born and, in a really cool twist, how Samhain itself is kind of making a comeback. And finally, we'll try to untangle this whole messy, fascinating history.
All right, so to really understand Halloween, we've got to jump in our time machine. And I mean way back. Forget candy corn, forget plastic skeletons. We're going to the world of the ancient Celts.
Okay, so it all kicks off with a festival called Samhain. And right off the bat, it's pronounced Samhain, not Samhain. The name literally means summer's end. And you gotta understand, this wasn't just some minor get-together. This was a huge deal for the Celts. It was the moment they officially shifted from the light half of the year into the dark, cold half.
So the core belief behind Samhain was that it was a liminal time. That's a fancy word for being in between. It was a moment that wasn't quite summer and wasn't quite winter. It was basically outside of normal time. And during this in-between moment, the Celts believed the veil separating our world from the other world got super, super thin. This meant that spirits, ancestors, but also fairy folk could just walk right over and hang out among the living. So yeah, it was a time to honor your dead relatives, but it was also a night you definitely wanted to be a little careful.
Fire was everything for this festival. Absolutely central. Druid priests would light these enormous communal fires, and people would take a flame from that sacred fire to relight the hearths in their own homes. And get this, here's a crazy little fact for you. You know the word bonfire? Well, it actually comes from bone fire, literally, because they would throw the bones of slaughtered animals into the flames as part of the ritual.
So for centuries, that's just how it was. Samhain was this major part of the yearly cycle, but then a new power, a new belief system arrived in the Celtic lands, and it was about to change everything. It added a whole new, complicated layer to our story. See, as Christianity started to spread, it had this really smart strategy. Instead of trying to just stomp out all the old traditions, which is really hard to do, it would often just absorb them. A perfect example is Pope Gregory III, back in the 8th century. He did something pretty brilliant, strategically speaking. He moved All Saints' Day from the spring, May 13th, all the way to November 1st, putting it directly on top of Samhain. And this quote right here, it lays out the playbook perfectly. The church figured out, hey, it's way easier to convert people if you just co-opt what they're already doing. So instead of tearing down a pagan temple, you just purify it and dedicate it to your God. They did the exact same thing with festivals. You could almost call it the original and maybe most successful cultural rebrand in history. And boom, right there, that's how we get the name. The night before All Hallows Day, October 31st, was known as All Hallows Evening. Or, All Hallows Eve. Say that a few times fast over a few centuries, and it just naturally shortens and slurs together into Halloween. Simple as that. But here's the thing. Even with this new Christian holiday on the calendar, the old ways didn't just disappear. Not at all. Instead, the ancient folk traditions started to kind of merge and mingle with the new religious ones, and what came out the other side was something totally new.
So that brings us to trick-or-treating. Where on earth did that come from? Well, it's a really cool evolution. You can see it in steps. It probably starts with a medieval practice called souling, where the poor would go door to door offering to pray for a family's dead relatives in exchange for little pastries called soul cakes. Then you get guising in Scotland and Ireland. People, especially young men, would dress up in costumes, maybe to blend in with the spirits wandering around, and they'd go around performing little tricks or songs for food and drink.
Now you take those traditions, bring them over to North America with immigrants, and by the 1920s, it's morphed into the trick-or-treating we recognize today.
And what about the jack-o'-lantern, the glowing face of Halloween? Well, that tradition comes straight out of a fantastic Irish folktale about a guy named Stingy Jack. Now, Jack was a real trickster, and the story goes he even managed to trick the devil himself, not once, but multiple times. But it backfired. When Jack died, he was too sinful for heaven, but because of his tricks, the devil wouldn't let him into hell either. So he was cursed to just wander the dark earth for eternity, with only a single burning ember from hell to light his way, which he carried inside a hollowed-out turnip.
That's right, a turnip. The very first jack-o'-lanterns weren't pumpkins at all. They were carved turnips, and they were meant to scare away wandering spirits, maybe even Stingy Jack himself. But then, when Irish immigrants came to America, they found a native plant that was perfect for this tradition, the pumpkin. It was bigger, it was hollow, it was way easier to carve. And just like that, the iconic American jack-o'-lantern was born.
Okay, so this is where the story splits into two very different paths. Because while Halloween was busy becoming this big, commercial, candy-fueled holiday, a totally different group of people started looking backwards. They wanted to strip away all the modern stuff and reconnect with the festival's ancient, spiritual heart.
Yeah, for a growing number of modern pagans, Wiccans, and Druids, October 31st isn't really Halloween at all. It's Samhain. They treat it as a deeply spiritual holiday, often called the Witches' New Year. It's a time for setting up altars to honor ancestors, for quiet reflection, and for really leaning into those original themes of death, rebirth, and the thinning of the veil.
And this quote from a modern Druid ritual, it just captures the mood so perfectly. It's not about being scared or spooky in a fun way, it's about a profound respect for the cycles of nature, a time when that boundary between worlds feels incredibly thin, and you can feel a real connection to what lies beyond.
So there we have it. Two paths, right? You've got the secular, commercial Halloween on one side and the spiritual revival of Samhain on the other. And it seems like they both come from the same ancient root. But, and this is a big but, some historians are now saying, hold on a second, that clean, straight line from ancient Samhain to modern Halloween, it might not be as real as we think.
So that's the big question, isn't it? Is our modern Halloween really just an ancient pagan holiday wearing a new costume? Can you actually draw a direct line from those Celtic bonfires to a modern costume party? Well, as it turns out, the answer is really complicated.
See, according to historians like Lisa Bittel, that whole neat and tidy origin story might be something of a modern invention itself. Her argument is that it was really 19th century folklorists, academics who were really into finding these deep, ancient pagan roots for their cultures, who kind of forced the connection. They took some bits about Samhain, some bits about harvest festivals, and wove them together into this grand, unbroken story that might have been more romantic than it was historically accurate.
So, when you really get down to it, what is Halloween? It's not one thing, it's this incredible mishmash. Think of it like a big cultural soup. The base is some ancient Celtic beliefs. Then you stir in a heavy layer of Christian rebranding. You add a dash of European folk customs like souling and guising. And then you pour in a giant helping of American commercialism, which has totally shaped the flavor of the holiday we celebrate today.
And that really leaves us with one final, fascinating thought. Holidays aren't set in stone. They're alive, and they change, and we're the ones who change them. Just look at Halloween's journey, from a sacred harvest festival to a Christian holy day to a night for pranks, and now to this massive, global commercial event. So the question isn't just, where did Halloween come from? The real question is, where is it going? What story are we going to tell about it 100 years from now? Because that's a story that we are all writing right now.